Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Elvis's neighbor, Mrs. Rutherford. And in the last few episodes, or the last 21 episodes, actually, we've been at the Circle G. And we're still there. It's still February 1967. Hi, Keith. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. And I see that Keith has said that the Colonel predicted that Elvis would get tired of the Circle G Ranch. And that might be true, but it's not going to be in this episode because we're still in February. He's just bought it. And we're going to be looking at some items that I'm going to bet none of you have ever seen before. Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Terry. Thank you for coming. Enjoyed your live stream. So we're going to start today with some lyrics from the song You Don't Know Me from the film Clam Bake. So we know that Elvis, on February 21st, he took a Lear jet and he flew to Nashville, Studio B, and he recorded 4 songs for Clam Bake. Then he got back on the plane and he came back and he went to the Circle G Ranch. And we know that he got up on his horse, Rising Sun, and he started riding, and he rode a whole lot that week. And at some point, he had to call out Dr. Nick to treat his saddle sores. And these lyrics are the following. And anyone could tell, you think you know me well, but you don't know me. And that could almost be a mantra or a mantra for Elvis's life. And anyone could tell, you think you know me well, but you don't know me. And there were a lot of people that thought they knew Elvis well. A lot of them published things about Elvis. Some of them long before he passed away. And those people didn't know Elvis well. And there were a lot of people Elvis dealt with in his life that were the same way. They'd been around him for a little bit, and suddenly they thought they knew him very well, but they didn't know him. Now let's take a look at some images the archive has brought us. And Keith says that Billy, who I'm assuming is Billy Smith, knew him well. Well, I would say that Billy knew certain facets of Elvis very well. But I think there's a lot of Elvis that Billy didn't know at all. Like the spiritual things that Elvis looked at. Billy didn't really have an interest in that. He wasn't interested in those books that Elvis was reading, or the notes that he was writing. Now, Elvis's Aunt Nash, she was a little more interested in that. But she only wanted to go so far with it as well. So that's one thing that Elvis, I think, was looking for in this period, was someone that he could have an intellectual conversation with about these things that interested him. And he'd been using Larry Geller, but he'd been using Larry Geller for a couple of years now, so I think he liked to talk to new people about it as well. And he tried to interest a lot of people, but they weren't very interested. And Marion says that it seems that the circumstances stopped Elvis, and that she's curious if that Mrs. Rutherford is a bad neighbor. Terry says that Donna Presley knew Elvis well. And Anna has joined us. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And I would say that Donna also knows some facets of Elvis very well, and she has some intimate knowledge of other facets of Elvis that have been explained to her or told to her by other family members. But I think, Donna, she came into the picture later. She's younger than Elvis. So there's a lot in the beginning of his life that she missed. But I think she did know him on a personal level very well, that he had a special connection to her and that they shared a lot of things. But I think Elvis was so complex, and he also had the ability, because he had the money and sometimes the time and the resources, to bring in a lot of varied people so that he could have a lot of different kinds of discussions, talk about different kinds of things. He had certain interests he would talk to these 2 or 3 people about, and certain interests he would talk more to these 2 or 3 people about. And Elvis had a lot of interests, and they moved and changed through time. So he brought in lots and lots of different people. And Colleen says she thinks Elvis only let you know what he wanted you to know about him. And I think that is very accurate. I think he was like a diamond with a lot of facets, and each person looked through one facet to try to see what they thought was the center of Elvis. But the lights played different tricks, and they could only see from one perspective. And things through the other side looked warped or twisted in some cases. A lot of times they were beautiful and magical, because Elvis seemed to make things beautiful and magical. And he also had this charisma, which Donna Presley also has, that when you're in their presence and you've been there for just a few minutes, you feel like you've known this person forever, and that you're old friends and you're sharing back and forth, but you've only known each other for a few minutes. And I believe that's why there are so many people that walked away from meetings with Elvis Presley believing that they were deeply personal friends. And Elvis had certain rituals that he used to deepen the experience of those moments, like giving you a personal item right off of his finger, like a ring, or another piece of jewelry that he was wearing, or something that he was holding in his hands, a scarf that he'd worn around his neck. All of those things had meaning for people, and they could hold those items later and show them to others and say, this is the time that I met Elvis. And on screen right now, we can see an image of Elvis, indescribably blue, in Fools Fall in Love, the 45. And it says at the bottom, coming soon, Elvis's new sacred LP album, How Great Thou Art. Well, that hasn't quite happened yet. So this is something that was released slightly before. Here we can see a close-up of the 45. Now, this particular 45 was released in February of 1967, even though it says 1966 on it. And that's because this is the UK release of Indescribably Blue. So I think what we just saw was the cover of the US release. And I'm not an expert on these records by any means. So if anyone is, feel free to jump in and tell us what the actual truth is. And at any time, in any broadcast of mine, feel free to jump in, put in any comments that you want. I'm not an expert on Elvis. I don't have any degrees in Elvis. I don't have any qualifications to talk about Elvis. Just a fan sharing what I know. So everybody should feel free to comment or chat and say what you've got to say, and we'll take a look at it all. We're looking at source materials and seeing what we can pull out of them. In this one, we can see that it says made in England by the Decca Record Company Limited. It's a RCA Victor product. So this one was created in England and released in February 1967. And that's when Britain could purchase this song. And Colleen said that Elvis looked sad in that picture. He did look a little downcast. He says that Larry did his hair well. Hair was looking pretty good there, and I believe that was Larry that was doing it. We can also see that Elvis was backed up on this song, Indescribably Blue, by the Jordanaires and the Imperial Quartet. That's like 8 people. This is a vinyl record, 7 inches, 45 RPM. That's what they call a single. It's got one song on one side. You flip it over, it's got one song on the other. So with every single, you get 2 songs. And this was written by a man named Daryl Glenn. And you can see that he's referenced as Glenn in parentheses under the name of the song. It's also orthophonic high fidelity, which is new orthophonic high fidelity. I have no idea what that means. I'm not a hi-fi guy. I know high fidelity is hi-fi. Ortho sounds like it has something to do with medical or feet, so I guess that would be pedo, so I don't know. And Elvis Girl 77 says that's a clam bake photo, I think. Time for him to be after the head trauma. So it's not a clam bake photo. I think it's it's not Speedway. That's the next one he's gonna do, but it's another one about racing that happened right before, and the name is escaping me. I'm so terrible with the names. And Marion says that she loves that song, Indescribably Blue. I was actually listening to it today to prepare for this episode. It is a nice song. Here we can see the flip side. It's Fools Fall in Love. And it's by Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, who wrote a lot of songs for Elvis. This is not a... I thought this was a pretty good song as well. I was going to say it's not a bad song, but I thought it was a good song. Again, it's new orthophonic high fidelity. And all the same information really as the other side of the disc, which would be expected. And instead of the sleeve with the picture on it, I think this might be the way you got it in England, or this was inside that other sleeve. So 45s are like before my time. You could purchase them during my lifetime, but my generation had moved on to cassettes. We were buying cassettes. And so I never purchased a 45, so I don't know how they were packaged or how they came. This might have just been the slip cover inside that other cover. Although I don't remember ever getting a hand-me-down 45 that had both a slip cover and an outside cover. But that could just be me. And the people who handed the stuff to me may not have taken very good care of their stuff. Spin out. Elvis Girl got it. Spin out. Thank you so much, Elvis Girl. And Keith got it too. And welcome, Elvis Girl. Good to see you here. And let's look at our next piece. This is an article that we're going to look at that was published on February 18th, 1967 in the New Musical Express, which I have never heard of. And so I looked it up. And apparently it's a newspaper out of London, England. And it's about the music industry, I think, is what I think that's what it focuses on. And at the top it says on sale Friday, week ending February 18th, 1967. So that tells me that it's a weekly newspaper. It's printed like once a week. And there's also an advertisement towards the bottom that says, next week, many more monkey surprises. So I'm sure that's a reference to the Monkees, which was a band at the time with a television show. And it's saying, don't miss them. But because it's saying next week, I believe this is a weekly newspaper. And at the top, in huge letters, it says, 2 word pictures of Elvis, which is their fancy way of saying they have 2 newspaper articles about Elvis. And Colleen says that Google says that picture came from Double Trouble. Could be. I know it's not from Clambake because he hasn't filmed it when this comes out. So they wouldn't have had any pictures from it yet. And because of the jacket, I thought that looked like something he was wearing in Spin Out. But Double Trouble, I think, was during the same period. And that's one of the things we're going to see as we move through the timeline is that, you know, people talk about how Elvis's movies performed poorly. And that poor performance is really stacked up against his previous performances. So it's not like he's competing against other people. He's competing against his own performances. And the issue is some of these movies are being released one on top of another. So the Colonel has lost control during the negotiation process of when the releases would actually take place. And it's part of what they traded off in order to get more money up front. But then that stacked a bunch of these Elvis movies together at times into the theaters. And then people were making choices between, do I want to see this Elvis movie or that Elvis movie? Or I saw an Elvis movie last week. Maybe I would like to see some other movies with other people this week. So the market got, the Colonel was always right about oversaturation of the market. And he always tried to prevent that. But during these few years, like there's 2 or 3 years here, these things are just stacked on top of each other. And the money that it seems like he's not making, well, it's going to one of his other movies. So there is a loss of total potential, but it's because these different studios refuse to, you know, like coordinate together. But I'm way off topic. So let me pull myself back into this article. And I think you're really going to find this fascinating. Of course, there's a big picture of Graceland on the front. They've superimposed a picture of Elvis looking down at it. And it says, there's a caption with the picture that says, his girlfriend lives with his granny in here, with an arrow pointing at Graceland. So it seems as if they're trying to insinuate something here to spark interest in the article. Perhaps create sales of the newspaper. And the title of the first article, which is the only one we're going to look at today, we'll look at the second article on another day. But the first one says next door neighbor. So that's the title of this article. We know it's coming from a next door neighbor. Now, I don't know where this neighbor lives next door to them, but maybe they'll tell us where in the article. And Keith says this is like another taboo magazine. Is that a specific magazine, Keith? Or are you referring to like tabloids? I think this is a tabloid magazine. I do believe that the person they're talking to is real, but it has been rewritten in a British dialect. So they've respelled all the words with the British spellings. And it's kind of like when they quote Sonny West in some of the British newspapers, his words come out sounding British for some reason. So I think there's a little bit of that going on here, but I do believe that Mrs. Rutherford is a real person who really was Elvis's neighbor, and that's who they're interviewing here. He says tabloids. Thank you, Keith. Hi, Richie. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate seeing you here. And here goes the article. We all know what the music business thinks of Elvis Presley. He's still the king. He has sold more records and more money-making movies than any pop star or stars to date. Now, they said something really important right there in the first sentence, or second sentence. He has sold or made more money-making movies. So they're acknowledging that what success is in the movie industry is not the ranking of the movie or the awards that it wins or the artistry of the movie per se. It's the money making of the movies. And Elvis has made more of those money making movies than any other stars. The article goes on. Publicly, he has always conducted himself like a gentleman and has made no visible enemies, perhaps because he meets so few people, thanks to his self-imposed isolation from the world at large. This young, sexy, vibrant hipster, who critics predicted more than 10 years ago would disappear in months, is still producing his discs and hit movies ad infinitum. So the article is acknowledging that for more than 10 years, Elvis Presley has been a huge success in the music and movie industry. The article says, but what do they think of El in his hometown of Memphis? This is where he grew up and where he resides still. Is he just another face, or is he a star there too? The following information comes from Mrs. Mabel Rutherford, who lives just one house away from El's famous home at Gracelands. She has been a Memphis resident since before El's early days of stardom. Her son and El were classmates. She has met El only once, but has kept tabs on her famous neighbor through her son, the local newspapers, and her hairdresser, who takes care of Elvis when he's in town and used to do his mother's hair before her death. So one of the interesting things about this article is they never refer to Graceland. They always refer to Gracelands. Always has an S on the end of it. And then they refer to Elvis as El, which in earlier episodes we've seen is not what, at least according to Gary Pepper, none of Elvis's family or friends call him El. The guys may refer to him as E, but his family always refers to him as Elvis. So here's what Mrs. Rutherford has to say. Elvis is well liked in this community and in Memphis. His behavior, as we find it, is always above reproach. When he is at home, he sleeps in the daytime and goes out for entertainment at night. When he is here, he sometimes rents a movie theater at midnight for himself and all his friends and their friends, and they see several movies at one sitting. Occasionally, he rents the whole fairground for an evening, and his crowd will ride on all the rides. This way, they are not bothered by the public. That's what he has to do to have a good time. And there's another section, simple food, where Mrs. Rutherford goes on. Elvis still likes the simple food he was brought up on. Mashed potatoes and gravy, steak, kraut, black-eyed peas, cornbread, etc. His grandmother lives in his home, and his girlfriend, Priscilla Ballou, has been living there too. Elle's father and stepmother and her 3 boys live in a house on the street behind Elvis's house, and of course, help to look after his home. So everything that we're seeing Mrs. Rutherford say, we know from other source material that we found. And we know from, I think most of us who have been Elvis fans for a while, we're all aware that Elvis would rent movie theaters in Memphis overnight, and they'd watch a lot of movies, that he would rent the fairgrounds, and they would ride all the rides. They'd do it all night. He loved the roller coaster, the Pippin. I can't remember the moniker that went with it, the adjective, a Zippin. The Zippin Pippin, which was a little small roller coaster, but he loved it. And the food that she describes, mashed potatoes and gravy, steak. Now, steak, mashed potatoes and gravy, yes. Steak, not so much. Elvis was not an eater of steak. The guys, they were steak eaters. They loved to eat steak, especially when Elvis was paying for it. I don't know what they ate when they were paying for it themselves. But when Elvis was paying for it, they loved to eat steak, especially Joe Esposito. That was one of his special things. But Elvis would prefer hamburger. Elvis liked simpler foods. So steak, this lady may have knowledge that a lot of steak goes into the place. Like she's mentioning the hairdresser who used to style Gladys's hair. And so Gladys may have talked to him, or he may have seen lots of steak come into the house. But that wasn't something that Elvis especially liked. Now, kraut, I believe, is sauerkraut. So I do think Elvis liked that. Black-eyed peas, sure he loved that. Cornbread, absolutely. And then she's revealing that Minnie Mae, his grandmother, and his girlfriend Priscilla, they're both living in the house, and that Elvis's father, Vernon, Dee Presley, his wife, who was Elvis's stepmother, and Billy, David, and Ricky, the 3 boys, Dee's 3 boys, they're all living on Dolan Street, which is right behind Elvis. There's a gate in the fence. Vernon can come over anytime. All of them may come over anytime they wish. Elvis may go over there and visit with them. There's a sunken hot tub in that house on the first floor. And I believe Elvis would use that hot tub along with Vernon. They would sit in there together and have talks. And Keith is saying, how does she know all this? Does she visit? So I think a lot of it is through the barber that she's mentioning. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And Richie's saying the word granny is disrespectful. Yes, the way that they come into this article is disrespectful. And then they switch to saying that he's still the king, but then they make clear that it's about money. And then they kind of switch into this, his girlfriend's living in his house. And so there is a bit of that in there. But what we can see actually coming through is that with his father living right behind him, he's already started to form this little like neighborhood or village. And we know that next to his father, Gary Pepper lives in a house. And Gary Pepper's father, Sterling Pepper, is working for Elvis as a gate guard. So there's already a little village community here. And that's what Elvis takes to the Circle G and then ramps up into something larger. So this is the nucleus of the dream right here. But yes, I agree that the newspaper is very disrespectful. And Gunn is asking, how does Mrs. Rutherford know so much being just a neighbor? Now, she also mentioned that her son knew Elvis. He was a couple of years younger, which would have made him a year younger than Red. So it's possible that he had been up into Graceland or talked to some other people that had been. A lot of the Humes guys, Elvis brought a lot of the Humes guys up to Graceland to look around. We don't really hear about that much, but he did do that. And Keith's saying that Lamar knew all about EP's eating habits. He knew some of them at certain times. Lamar always felt like he knew everything, but I'm not sure that Lamar knew as much as he thought he did. But there is that famous clip where he's talking about the eating habits that he believes led to Elvis's demise. So yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And Debbie's saying that she's thinking that this neighbor's watching him with binoculars. That is very possible, Debbie. Absolutely 100% possible. But some of this stuff was also in the newspapers, like where Vernon moved to. I believe that was a newspaper article. Like that was news. Vernon's moved, because he moved a couple of times. And then Gunn saying that Lamar talked a lot. He sure did. But he was entertaining most of the time, and that's why Elvis liked to have him around. Because you never knew what Lamar might say. Could be anything. And you just couldn't predict it, and a lot of times it would just crack Elvis up. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Well, let's get back to the article. Oh, so we're getting right to the part where she talks about her son. So, of course, I've already read this. So I've already referenced things that we haven't actually gotten to and you haven't heard yet. So let's get into this. Mrs. Rutherford says, a few little things I remember about his early days. My son, Gary, now 28 years old, was in high school with Elvis and told me Elvis used to go up to parked cars and drive-in restaurants and say, let me sing something for you. He just wanted to sing for the pure pleasure of it for anyone who would listen. Now that's a cute story, right? That Elvis was at these drive-in restaurants and he'd go up and ask people, young couples that were in the car, if he could sing something for them. And that is a true story. Elvis did do that. Elvis used to take Dixie, and one of their hangouts would be Earl's Hot Biscuits, or I think it's Kay's Drive-In was the name of the other one, across the street. So they were right across the street from each other. And he'd usually start at Kay's, and he would sit in the parking lot. They'd get a little something to eat, usually like share a soda or something like that. He'd like to go on double dates there with his cousin, Gene Smith, and the woman that eventually married Gene. Can't think of her name at this moment again, my name thing. But they would all date there. They'd all go up in one car. And they get a little something, and Elvis would bring his guitar, and he would serenade in the parking lot. And eventually, the K's management would come out and ask him to leave. He'd been there too long, you need to move on. He'd go over to Earl's Hot Biscuits. And Earl's Hot Biscuits, they loved having him over in the parking lot. Told him he could stay as long as he wanted. Because these teenagers seemed to flock to wherever he was, and then their business would increase. The K's didn't see it that way. But yes, he was singing to people in cars at the drive-in theaters. And Mrs. Rutherford goes on. His mother belonged to a holiness church, and I think he got his style of singing from the emotional type of music that church has. He was very devoted to his mother. He bought her a pink Cadillac, and when she was in the hospital just before she died, she had it parked so she could see it from her hospital window. I'm not sure I've ever heard that anecdote before about Gladys, that she had that car parked, or that maybe Elvis had somebody park that car there so that she could see it from her hospital window. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. But that's an interesting piece of trivia, right? That she was able to see that car while she was in that bed at that hospital. Not sure that that's true, but it's something really nice to think is true. And Mrs. Rutherford goes on. Elvis has given so much to charities here, often $50,000 at a time, to be divided among several needy causes. No wonder people here write editorials to the paper requesting different new buildings, streets, etc. to be named after him. This is another true statement from Mrs. Rutherford. Elvis did give, and a number that it often was $50,000 at Christmas time that was divvied up amongst different charities. So the number varied, but $50,000 captures the essence or the emotional truth of what's being said here. Elvis did do this, and people writing in and asking for these different places to be named for him, absolutely true. And Mrs. Rutherford says he never forgets anyone who had ever been kind to him in his boyhood, when he had absolutely nothing. The Presleys lived in a government housing project here, and his father never earned much money, so Elvis barely had the necessities for life. Well, mostly that's true, what she's saying. That is mostly true. He never did really forget anyone who'd been kind to them. We can't say absolutely no one, but he has a really good record. They didn't forget people who were kind to him. And he did live in a government housing project, and they did struggle with money, especially around the time that he became famous. And Keith says that he's never heard that story about the car being parked at the hospital either. But a lot of what she's saying is true, Keith, so that's why I'm wondering if there's also veracity in that story. Even though this isn't the greatest paper in the world, we're seeing a lot of truth come out of it here. And Linda says that she believes all the beautiful stories are definitely true. That's a good way to look at it, Linda. I mean, they're all emotionally true, whether they're true in fact or not. And Debbie says that Mrs. Rutherford must have been on the neighborhood watch to know this much. Keith's saying that Elvis Presley Boulevard is the only place named after him. And Richie's saying Mrs. Rutherford was nuts. And Linda says he has the best reputation of the kindest man on earth. I would agree with that. He's known the world over, globally, as a man of kindness. And Mrs. Rutherford goes on. A neighbor woman with children his age used to give Elvis 25 cents every Saturday to go to the movies. When Elvis came back home once, after he started making big money, he completely refurnished her house. Well, Linda, there's another nice story for you. I don't know if that one's true either. I've never heard that one. I'm not saying it's not true. Certainly sounds like something Elvis might do, but I can't put a name to the neighbor woman. But now, I might be, since I'm going to be on the lookout for it more, maybe I'll see it. But it's another awful nice story. And the next section here says, couldn't pay. And here, Mrs. Rutherford tells us a story about the barber. And she says, his barber on Main Street used to cut his hair whether he could pay or not. On one of his more recent visits here, he walked in, got his hair cut, laughed, and said, put it on the cuff. So put it on the cuff is an old expression that I've never even heard, which means put it on my tab or give it to me on credit. I'm not going to pay for it right now. I'll pay you next Tuesday for a hamburger today. So Elvis has come in, he's got his hair cut, he's making money now, but he says, hey, put it on the cuff. And Mrs. Rutherford says, then he handed the barber the keys to a new Chevrolet car parked in the front. Elvis is quite a character. He has a heart of gold, I think. So Elvis played this little trick on the barber where he made him think it was old times once again. He was going to skip out and not pay this bill because he didn't have the money. But instead he had a set of keys to a brand new car just for this barber sitting out in the parking lot. And I'm 99.5% sure that that story is true. We're going to talk about it in a minute. And Keith is saying, does anyone live in this residence? The residence where Mrs. Rutherford lives? I don't know what residence she lives in. I'm assuming she lives on Dolan Street near Vernon behind the house. Because there are no other neighbors to Elvis that I'm aware of. And Linda's saying that one consistent thing said by everyone is that Elvis was the most generous man ever. And that is true. That comes through in all the stories. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Mrs. Rutherford, she's got more to say. She says Elvis's girlfriend, Priscilla Ballou, was his steady date in Germany for 6 months. She was 16 when he completed his tour of duty and returned to the United States. Well, Mrs. Rutherford's, kind of right, and she doesn't have everything right. The age is not correct. But for a member of the public who's only seen Elvis one time, that's fairly accurate. Mrs. Rutherford goes on. Soon after, she moved into Gracelands and continued her schooling from there. Elle's father or stepmother drove her to classes in a Continental until she was 18. And a Continental is a big car. A Lincoln is there's Lincolns and there's Cadillacs. And this is a Lincoln Continental. Really nice big car. And Mrs. Rutherford says, when she turned 18, then Elle gave her a fire engine red Chevrolet. Now, one thing I'm fairly certain of is that Mrs. Rutherford never called Elvis Elle. That's whoever wrote this newspaper put that in there. Same way that they keep changing Graceland to Gracelands. That's whoever wrote this. And I'm assuming they probably talked to her by phone or something. And Richie says that Elvis was the most beautiful man inside and out, and he was amazing. Mrs. Rutherford says there are many rumors that Priscilla and Elvis are secretly married, but nothing definite has been announced in Memphis. I don't know much about her, except I do remember one incident. There is a woman's clothing store here, the plushest in Memphis, and the saleswoman there told us that one night, after they had closed the store, they saw Elvis and Priscilla looking longingly in the window. They recognized Elvis, so they asked them to come in. Elvis bought the girl $3,000 worth of clothes. That was a few years ago. She was just a child, they said. So Mrs. Rutherford has given us kind of a gossipy story here that Elvis bought Priscilla some clothes at a swanky place in Memphis that they opened up at night just for him. Not really unusual for Elvis. And that he bought $3,000 worth of clothes, which is quite a bit, because that'd be about $30,000 today, like between $25,000 and $30,000 worth of clothes. So they must have been some awful nice clothes, or a whole lot of them, if that is the actual number. It's awful easy for people to inflate the numbers in an Elvis story. But it seems like there's some truth there that Elvis took Priscilla somewhere in Memphis after hours. He bought her some clothes, probably spent a lot of money. And she was somewhat young. And Linda says that she doesn't believe they were secretly married. Well, that's true. They were not secretly married. And Mrs. Rutherford, here's what she ends with. So far, Memphis has done nothing as a memorial to Elvis, but I can't help thinking that it won't be long before they do. Through his exemplary behavior while he is at home, his kindness to old friends, and his generosity to those less fortunate than he, Elvis has earned the respect of nearly everyone. He is truly a favorite son. Colleen says if they had secretly married, Priscilla would have told us 15 different stories about it. Well, I'd say she would have told us at least two published anyway. But here, Mrs. Rutherford has ended with they haven't done anything in Memphis to commemorate Elvis at this point. But we know that the mayor has declared that the Mid-South Coliseum is now the Elvis Presley Coliseum, declared by the mayor because the fans have already made it so. Now, unfortunately, once the mayor's out of power, the city council never lets that go through, and they don't officially rename that stadium. It's just the mayor who does it. It only lasts for a short time. But it's Gary that got that done. His friend, Gary Pepper, who lived near him, confined to a wheelchair for his entire life. Gary and his mother managed to get that done through the mayor, but it didn't last. Now we've got a couple more pictures to look at. This is a belt, a very beautiful belt that is embroidered with what looks like a Native American design to me, to my untrained eye. It's got a lot of colors in it. That's the front of the belt. Here's the back of the belt. So this appears to be a leather belt that this embroidery has been done on to make these intricate geometric, I would say, Native American designs, or inspired by Native American designs, rainbow colored. This is a belt that Elvis wore in the 1960s. This belt Elvis gave to his barber, Homer Gilland, or Gilliland. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. It's Homer, just like Homer Simpson, so I know everyone knows how to spell that. But Gilliland is Let me start over. Gilliland is Gilleland. He used to cut the hair of the entire Presley family. And here is an excerpt from a letter of authenticity which accompanied other items that he put up for sale, which have been gifted to him by Elvis. This is one of those items. This item did not come with this particular letter, but there are a lot of items that Homer that originated with Homer that are now out in the world that came from Elvis, and many of them have a letter that's almost identical to this. And it says, "My name is Homer Gilliland. For over 20 years, preceding his death, I was personal hairdresser for Elvis Aaron Presley. I also did Elvis's mother's hair and Elvis's father Vernon too. During my employment as Elvis's friend and hairdresser, he gave me numerous gifts of clothing and personal property owned and used by himself." So this is one of those pieces. And Homer is the barber that Mrs. Rutherford is referring to. It's got to be him. He's the Memphis barber, the Memphis hairstylist, the one who used to work on Gladys's hair. He went to Graceland and worked on her hair there at Graceland. But he had been working on Elvis's hair, cutting Elvis's hair. And as we see, Mrs. Rutherford has said, he did some of those cuts for free because Elvis needed to have his hair cut. He took care of Elvis, and later, Elvis took care of him. So as we move through the many episodes that I'm going to be bringing to you guys, Homer will appear again, because more of what Elvis has given him is going to show up in all of my series. This one about the Circle G and the mystery of August 16th, 1977, and various videos and shorts and such. Homer will be appearing. And he's going to be appearing through items, just like we see on the screen. And Linda says that it's a pretty belt, and Gunn says it's colorful, beautiful belt. Emma's saying it's a nice belt. Keith thinks it's a great belt. Colleen says it's a nice belt, and if it was handmade, that's a lot of work. And Richie says there's only one Homer, and that's the Simpson. Keith says these are great new facts about Elvis. And Gunn is asking, where is the best now? Where is the belt now? The belt is out in the world. Somebody's bought it on the auction circuit, along with everything else Homer ever had. I don't think any of it ever circulated back to Graceland. It's all just owned by various Elvis collectors throughout the world, if they still exist. And Linda says that she loves all these stories that she's never heard. Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate that. And we have reached the end of another hour. So we didn't quite make it back to the Circle G and the story from Jerry Schilling that I promised you guys that you weren't going to like, about things that are going wrong on Circle G and in Elvis's life. But we are going to be seeing those in future episodes as we continue to make our way through 1967 and really understand everything that the Circle G was attached to. It was only around about a year. Really less than a year. But Elvis carried it with him for the rest of his life. He made major personal adjustments here at the ranch, changed his way of thinking, I believe, and came back out, did the 1968 special, did the 1969 return to the stage, and just kept moving forward. Until he hit like another roadblock around 1974, 1975, and he felt like he wasn't doing as much. I'm going to leave you guys with a song about Circle G, the dreams that Elvis had there, and the name of the song that I wrote based on source material that we've all looked at together, called Circle G Dreams.
I drew a line in the dirt, said this land could be yours. 1 acre each, a house, a porch, a door. I saw the light in their eyes, like stars in the dust. But the paper stayed blank, and the dream gathered rust. I wasn't cash poor, I was rich in belief, trying to carve out a kingdom beneath cotton clouds and the Mississippi sun. But every time I reached, the dream came undone. Don't you forget what I tried to make, a home for the hearts I refused to forsake. They called it a whim, they called it a waste, but I saw a commune, not just empty space. Don't you forget me when the fences arise, when the ranch house fades and the silence lies. I gave you the down, I gave you the land. but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. They said zoning laws, they said legal red tape, but I saw a chapel in every landscape, a replica of Graceland, a circle of trust, but the curl was bust, and the dream turned to dust. I signed the checks, I made the calls, watched the trailers roll in like prayer storms. But Vernon's face, tight as a gate, held back the flood of what I tried to create. Don't you forget what I tried to give, a place where my people could finally live. They called it a farm, they called it a phase, but I saw a future in the ranch's haze. Don't you forget me when the lights go out, when the house plans fade and the voices doubt. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand.